This is truly the scariest, most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. I have never been so petrified in my life. To this day, I still do not know who this man was, what he was trying to do, or if he still is where I saw him. I'm sorry for how long the geographical description is. I just want everyone to understand how secluded I was when this happened, and how badly it could have ended if it wasn't for my parents. I was back home for summer for the first time in a year after starting university. Our home was, and still is, just outside of a small town with forests all around. There was also a small man-made lake, which was diverged from a river that ran for miles through the forest and ramified into a few streams east of the lake. Near my home, there was a small grassy path that led to the river following a stream. It was a long walk, but one that I used to go on often as a child. I knew the forest there well. I knew where I could cut through dense trees to meet the stream. The walk that I would always go on led me off the path, which turned northwest slowly, so away from the stream, and then took a sharp turn to the west. After a few miles walk, at which point the stream was hidden quite deep into the forest. I would continue to walk north and follow the stream through the forest to get to the river, and then follow the river west to get to the lake. It's easy to get lost in this forest because the terrain isn't just a slope down to the water. It goes up and down, and you end up completely surrounded by trees. I had spent many days wandering around there alone, or with my dad over the span of 18 years. I never saw anybody else in that forest. I went there twice that summer, both times alone-ish. The first time, I left in the morning. I walked along the path away from the stream to the sharp bend and then cut back into the forest. I reached the stream after an hour or so. As I was running my hands in the water, I heard a bell from far away, coming from the north. Something was making a bell ring fervently and periodically, which I found strange. I listened well, wondered if it was a lost hunting dog, and started moving towards the sound. I bloody know that I'd be the first person to die, but I was heading north anyway, so what the heck. I realized that it couldn't have been an animal. I could tell that the bell was too heavy, because of how clear the sound was to be on a collar. I kept moving, and the bell was moving away from me. It stopped completely after 5 minutes. The stream wasn't big enough or strong enough to carry a bell. That could have been enclosed in a tin or something, and the river was far too still. I thought of everything, but nothing explained the sound, apart from one obvious thing, which I just didn't feel comfortable with for some reason. I knew that it had to have been a person. I stopped thinking about it and just walked on normally. Until I found a badger, a bloomin' dead one, carefully decapitated. It had obviously been done with a knife. It was fairly fresh, the body was still limp, and there wasn't too much of a smell coming from it. The wound was full of maggots, but I knew that happened soon after exposure. The sound of the bell had been following the stream, and so had I. So the badger was put there, maybe attacked there, at least decapitated, while I was walking that way, I suppose, but I don't really know. Nothing else happened that day. 1 week later, I went back for the second time that summer, and the last time ever. I left home at around 6 p.m. Yeah, I know. I made it to the stream, and then walked to the river in an hour, and then decided to go back the way that I came because it was getting late and it was raining quite heavily. The sun set around 9 p.m. I was walking as fast as I could. The sound of the rain in the trees was surreal and loud. I was somewhat trotting with my head down for a while through the clearest and most open part of the forest when I bumped into something heavy. The smell was sickly. It was the decomposing body of the badger, with his head strung to his front paws. That area looked a bit like a ham because of the way that it was tied, just swinging from a tree, like an almost literal load of bullocks. It was his putrid bag of stench, wet and dripping green liquid. I started gagging. I had some sort of mucus-textured fluid in my hair. It was repulsive. At first, I just stared at it, slightly gobsmacked, and then I started fidgeting violently because I felt like I was drenched in its juices. I was soaking from the rain. My senses became confused. It felt like a bucket of cold ice water had been thrown over me when I realized that I had walked the same way to get to the river. So someone had strung the body up after I had passed it on their way there. Someone knew I would see it. So, was someone watching me and running around the forest, with the faint sounds of branches breaking around me and not animals? I looked around and started jogging. I was half running, half walking away from the stream back towards the path for a while, when I heard the bell again. I proceeded to call my dad while running. I told him to meet me on the path where it sharply turns west. It was the closest part of the path to me, to go as fast as he could and that someone was in the forest. I can't explain the feeling I had. It was like I had just crapped on my intestines and stomach. I literally felt the hairs on my neck raise despite being soaked. It was dark. I jogged as fast as I could. I was panicking because the path was still a bit far away, just too far to feel safe. It was still raining. Every single sound was muffled. I felt like everything was further away than ever before. The bell went on for way longer than the last time, on and off. I felt like it was surrounding me at one point. The fear combined with my compromised hearing and the fact that I couldn't flip and breathe properly was making me slightly lose my sense of direction. I was automatically heading southwest, but I wasn't really sure what I was even doing. I was breathing like a freaking horse, coughing my lungs up, kind of crying out loud like a toddler does, tripping over leaves and twigs like an idiot. I stayed on the phone with my mom, who was on her way with my dad. I kept hearing sounds, but I wasn't sure what they were. My mom was screaming on the phone at the same time that they were on the path, that I needed to run, that my dad had gotten out and was heading east from the path bend. I was terrified, so I went into survival mode. I was doing the half-running, half-speed walking thing again because I was out of breath. And then, I heard branches break. Clear footsteps for the first time from down in the forest, and the bell ringing louder. I didn't want to, but I looked over my shoulder. And that's when I saw what was in the forest with me. A tall figure creeping in my direction at the very end of the clearing, ringing his bell slowly in front of his stomach. I could tell that he was staring straight at me. Now, I don't know if I had a hidden secret sprinting ability or instinctual adrenaline-induced superhuman powers, but when I tell you that I ran for my life, I frickin' didn't look back once. I screamed as much as I could. I lied. I'm on the phone with the police. They are on the path. Dad, I can see you, I'm here. I wanted to yell, Dad, please, where are you? But I kept that to myself. I felt like something awful was going to happen. I felt like the man was right behind me. I kept telling myself not to look back. I was gasping and wheezing, crying so hard and screaming for my dad. I felt shivers on my neck, and then switched off and I just ran. I even dropped my bag and only realized that I didn't have it anymore when I was in the car. I felt like my phone was my only way home. Things no longer felt real. It was like my legs were moving by themselves. I didn't know if the man was still following me. I could only hear my heart beating in my ears and the bell. I finally heard my dad shout my name, and I knew that he was coming my way, and that he could see me because of the intonation in his voice. I pretty much lunged myself at him when we got to each other. My dad heard the bell too. My mom could hear it on the phone. She was waiting with the car, ready to leave fast. We went directly to the police station, and I got medical attention soon after. My dad burst into tears in the car, said that he could hear the bell, and thought that he wouldn't be able to see me. Asked what if I didn't have my phone, what if he hadn't picked up. They were almost as terrified as me because they witnessed everything through the call. They could hear me trying to run, and they could hear the danger, but they just couldn't see it. The police couldn't really do much. They searched the area and the only thing they found was a folded t-shirt placed under a rock. I didn't really question that at the time. And my bag was not recovered. They said it was probably some homeless man living in the forest, but failed to realize what could have happened if my dad didn't know that part of the forest like I did and where to find me. I'm not blaming anyone. The entire thing was my fault. There are just so many what ifs. I want to believe it was just someone who decided to live in the woods and hunt or something. Maybe they were a bit mentally unstable and they felt angry that I came into their territory. But what if it was more insidious? The way that he moved towards me was abnormal. It was perverse because of how slowly he was ringing the bell. It's like he had me trapped. I didn't see any more detail. I just ran. To this day, I can't bloody go anywhere where I'll be alone and the sound of bells is a real problem. The smell of moss as well. Anyway, my parents and Steve Jobs saved my life. So, go hug yours now and take decapitated badgers and bells as pagan signs that you're unwelcome. For a little background story, I've been a scout since I was 8 years old, and last year I was the leader of my team, so I had to do all the paperwork and calls for finding places to camp. It was mid-November, and I had to find a place to camp. But since I was lazy, I decided to wait a week before the actual weekend. A week before the weekend, I decided to call some owners so that I could have a place to sleep. As I call many numbers, all of the owners are unavailable or simply not here. But then I see a number which I never called before, since it was at the end of the list. I called and an old lady picked up the phone. I do the basic presentations and all, and she agrees to let me and my team stay at hers, and we are making agreements. That afternoon, I go to her property to check everything such as potable water, a place to put the tent up, and the campfire. The place is kind of dark, but it's nice. The week passes and Saturday arrives. The Saturday is going well. We had some great games, we ate a lot, and we had a good night show. As they go to sleep in the tent, I stay awake to finish paperwork for the next day. It's now about midnight and I decide to go to sleep because we have to wake up early to go to church. As I switch off the flashlight, one of my newbies, we are 8 in total, wants to go to the toilet, aka the tree, and asked me to come with him. I could understand because it's better to be accompanied at night, especially in the woods. He does his business and suddenly, I hear some noises far away, but not that far. I tell myself that it's nothing. It just must be some animals trying to find food. We go back to the tent and that's when I hear footsteps approaching. As I hear those footsteps, I remain calm and tell myself, maybe it's the old lady coming to check to see if we didn't make a fire too close to anything. But I still have an odd feeling because it's midnight and why would she do this at this hour? And then the footsteps go silent for about 10 minutes. But then I hear more coming to our tents. Thankfully, all of my campers are sleeping because they would have been scared. I was the oldest one and they were about 3 or 4 years younger. As I hear footsteps which seem to come from one person, I hear others coming from the back of the tent, and I thought, okay, this is getting weird. I need to do something. I checked the tent by the inside and thank God, one of my newbies left some embers from the fire, so I could see what happens between the fire and the zip of my tent. A minute passes by, and a silhouette is there just between the fire and my tent. I stopped breathing. I literally froze. I started to move towards my phone when I saw the silhouette coming closer to the zip of the tent. I sent a message to one of my bosses, who are always camping in the near areas if something happens. But I knew that she would take too long, so I had to think of something, and think fast. And that's when I had an idea. I put my alarm on like a big siren, because sometimes we do like night games and wake up in the middle of the night. So I put my bell on and my campers wake up. The silhouette had started to unzip, and I actually saw fingers from below. But as the silhouette heard everybody waking up, she or he sprinted back to where they came from. And that's when I saw 2 other silhouettes sprinting back in the same direction. Luckily, everything ended well. Around 20 minutes later, my boss came and stayed the night, and I never had to deal with those silhouettes again, thankfully.